Hey, everybody, I hope you all are doing well, and welcome back to Michael's Matters. And of course, today is the day, the point really of this whole year has been leading up to for folks on retirement benefits, which is the day that we get the final numbers of inflation. Yeah. Now, of course, it may not seem like that big of a deal, but the reality is that these numbers today are from the newest CPI report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, who are the folks at the government who keep track of these kinds of things. And they will set the financial course and the financial destiny, if you will, for the 68 million plus of Americans who are currently receiving Social Security benefits. So that could be Social Security Retirement, which of course is the largest of those groups, but also Social Security Disability SSDI, Supplemental Security Income SSI, survivors, spousal benefits, and really all the other iterations of Social Security. So, I mean, let's face it, it is truly a big, hairy deal because it's going to let us know what folks are going to get paid for the entirety of 2024. So today we're going to be breaking down the inflation numbers, and we're going to talk about what the Social Security cost of living adjustment, or the COLA, will actually definitively finally be for 2024, and how that breaks down into real dollars in the pockets of beneficiaries. Now, this is Michael's Matters, and before we get to it, if you like these videos, if you find them interesting, if you find them helpful, or if you at least find them useful, please don't forget to like and subscribe, because it does really help the channel to grow. And again, we are so thankful for that, but also because you get updates when our newest and most informative videos become available. All right, now let's get down to the video. First, let's get to the report that discusses where inflation was for the month of September. And just in case you need a refresher, the reason that September is such an important month is because it is the last piece of the puzzle for how much the cost of living adjustments for folks on Social Security will be for 2024. Because the COLA is derived from an average of the inflation numbers for the third quarter of every year. So that's July, August, and September. For this last month, we know for certain, after the last couple of months of speculation, where the COLA will be. Now, the first number that we get out is the overall inflation for the country, which is called the CPIU. This number is important because it tells us how much the cost of basically everything is increasing year over year in our country, also known, as inflation. And for the month of September, that number came out to 3.7%. Now, some of the biggest reasons why inflation rate has stayed flat at 3.7%, because that's where it was last month as well, is because some of the specific goods that got measured had big increases, like transportation services, which was at 9.1%, and shelter, which went up by 7.2%. And keep in mind, even though the percentages are not that big, the cost that we all have for shelter, rent, is one of the largest costs that most people have. So when it goes up a couple points, even 7.2%, it actually is a lot more in dollars. A lot of things also went down as well. So utility gas dropped by 19.9%, which is a pretty big drop. And health insurance also dropped. I don't really know how it dropped, but it dropped by 37.3% from last September. But overall, we see that the CPIU was unchanged, or unched, as some people say, which means that inflation currently is staying higher and likely will continue to stay for longer, even if the actual elements of that inflation are shifting around. Now, of course, those goods and services are super important to know because they got more expensive and they are things that we really do need. But overall, it looks like we will continue to see the rate of inflation stay at that higher rate, which means it could actually be both good as well as bad for Social Security beneficiaries. But we'll get to that in one sec. Now, the CPIU, that's all well and good. And it shows the cost of everything going up. That'd be something I don't know, right? We've stopped at the gas station in the last couple weeks or the last month or so, you'll definitely see it. But for the COLA, for Social Security specifically, the measurement inflation that is used to figure out the increase in a basket of goods is different from that CPIU. Instead, they use something called the CPIW, which we also got this month, which stands for the Consumer Price Index for Urban Wage Workers. Now, the metric is different because basically the list of goods that it measures the prices on, those change around, and they are just a list of goods and services that the average urban wage earner uses during the year rather than the average American in total. And like they do with the CPIU, they just take the list from last year, from 2022 in this case, and compare it to all those same exact costs for those same exact goods and services in 2023. And the difference between the two is the rate of inflation. In the most recent report from September, though, it shows the CPIW went up by 0.2% from the previous month in August, where it was at 3.4%. Year over year since last September, that means that it is now at 3.6%. Now, this is just, of course, 1 month, the month of September, but the COLA, or the cost of living adjustment for seniors and folks on Social Security benefits, is made up from the average of the last 3 months ending with September. This means that up to the month of August, so last month, the 3 month average, the hypothetical COLA that would be, had it at 2.83%. But with this new additional information for September, it brings that 3 month CPIW and thus the real non-hypothetical COLA for 2024 to the grand total of 3.2%, which is what the COLA will be starting in January for those folks on Social Security benefits. In this case, both the months of July and August were actually lower than September. And with September being flat, kind of really slows the increase of what the COLA could have been. And it stops right at that 3.2%, which is actually still going to be a lot higher than what it would have been at the previous 3 months by about 0.5%. When we look at what that means in terms of real dollars for the average Social Security beneficiary, we can take the average retirement benefits for the month of August, which we know is at $1,840 a month on average. Again, not everyone is average. In fact, nobody is really average, but on average, all put together, $1,840 a month. We apply that 3.2% COLA increase to it from the 3 month average for the CPIW, and that would mean that the average Social Security beneficiary will get an increase of about $58.89 a month, or a total benefit of $1,891.18 a month, which is a little bit less than what it had been previously. That can be done the same for the average SSDI beneficiary, who has an average benefit of $1,486 a month in August. So that means that they would get an increase of $47.58. And then lastly, for folks on SSI, so Supplemental Security Income, they had an average monthly benefit in August of 2023 of $674, which means that for 2024, they're going to see an increase of $21.58 for a month. Now, lastly, I want to look at another measurement that shows how much the COLA should be if it was to fairly calculate, or more fairly calculate, the COLA based off what retired Americans' financial needs really are. Because continually for the last decade or so, Social Security cost of living adjustment has been basically undercutting the budgets of seniors, meaning that year over year, although they have been getting increases, it has not been lining up with the inflation that seniors specifically experience. This is for two reasons. The first is that the metric that is being used to calculate the COLA, the CPIW, which, like I said before, is the Consumer Price Index for the urban wage workers. The flaw in the measurement is that it measures what the average urban wage worker buys on a year-to-year basis, which can be substantially different than what the average senior or retired American buys. For example, seniors tend to spend more money on things like healthcare, transportation, and housing, which is not exactly weighted fairly in the CPIW. That being said, there is, in fact, another metric called the CPIE, or the Consumer Price Index for elderly, of course, not very creatively or even correctly or even politely named, but, economists. But it actually does measure what the inflation increase is for things that older Americans buy specifically. And it almost always shows an inflation rate that is considerably higher than what gets calculated in the CPIW or the COLA. Last month, though, for example, the CPIE showed that seniors had experienced an inflation rate of 4.15% just from August to August, with the 3 month average being at 3.88%, which is consistently higher than either the CPIW or what the CPIU is showing. But with the September data, it shows a 4.14% increase in inflation for seniors and a 3 month average of 4.03%. So that is, again, way higher. And it also means that to keep up, if the COLA were to be correctly calculated based off the CPIE, that folks on Social Security Retirement Benefits would see a $74.15 increase. Folks on Social Security Disability should be getting a $59.92 increase, and folks on SSI get a 27.16, so $27.16 increase if it was to use those more correct CPIE numbers. So the real question is a 3.2% increase overall in the COLA good or bad for seniors and retirees? And like the typical answer that you will get from an economic textbook, the answer is yes And the answer is no. It depends. So it is good because the fact that it is true that the COLA for 2024 is going to be, it is going to be substantially lower than what it was this year at 8.7% for 2023. Last year, during the test period for the COLA, that July, August, and September, there was a whole slew of sort of freak events, gas price spikes, which I guess is not that strange considering our situation now, but also supply issues because of the Ukrainian war, the Putin price hike. Remember all that stuff? That caused inflation to skyrocket momentarily in just those 3 months, which means that our older friends and family members and neighbors got a COLA of 8.7% based off that momentary spike. And the great thing was that inflation dropped pretty dramatically right after that test period. So everyone got an 8.7% increase, while inflation dropped down to 3-4% for quite some time, which actually had the effect of putting more money and more purchasing power back into the pockets of older Americans than really at any other point in living memory. But this year, the COLA is going to be at a much lower 3.2%, which is, even less than half of 8.7. But as inflation sits right now, it is still going up, which means it is the second worst possible situation because each month that inflation stays higher than 3.2%, which we know it is right now, it means that people on Social Security benefits will start to lose purchasing power each and every one of those months, and their budgets are already stretched to the max. Furthermore, the increase in inflation is a double whammy for people on fixed retirement benefits because even though the COLA is pinned to the CPI number, those baskets of goods, they measure many, many, many things, and you can see the full list if you want to look it up, but they don't measure everything. No list can measure literally everything. But inflation, it does actually hit everything. So as people get higher COLAs when inflation goes up, they also get hit with an increase in everything in the inflation baskets of goods, in addition to those things that are not inside that basket of goods, which means that they actually get hit with a much higher rate of inflation than even is measurable. So needless to say, it is complicated, and we will just have to see how over the next couple of months things go into 2024. Then we will get our final answer if the COLA really is good enough, or if it is going to be another short year for Social Security beneficiaries, but we probably won't know that until, 2025. All right, so that's it for today's Michael's Matters, and I really hope that you found it interesting or you found it helpful, or hey, if you found it useful. And if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe because it does really help the channel to grow, and we are super, super thankful for that. But also because you get updates when our newest and most informative videos become available. So for Michael's Matters, I'm Michael, hoping that you take care of yourselves, take care of others, and have a happy, healthy